Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Rent Prep for Landlords. This is episode number 316. We got some big news on the podcast today, which we'll get to after the start of this. But we got a guest on. It's going to be familiar to a lot of you guys who have been following the podcast and different content we've been producing for a while. I've got Andrew Schultz here. How you doing today, Andrew?
Doing great. How are you today?
Good. I'm excited to get to the big news, but we'll do that little awkward segue I always do. We'll get to that right after this.
1, 2, 3, 4. Welcome to the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast. And now your host, Eric Worrell.
Yeah, the segue, that's the awkward thing I just kind of started doing and just kept it. But, I like to be authentic with the podcast and be awkward on the podcast because that's the way it is in real life,
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So if a lot of you guys remember, Andrew, you've been on the podcast at least, I would guess, maybe 5 times, probably.
Has it been that many?
I know you came in for when Jamie, Michelle came in talking about animal addendums. And then I know that we recorded another one without her. And I feel like you just like little segments too. I think I've had you on.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But the big news, I don't know, maybe our podcast editor, Luca, can do like a drum roll or something here for us. But we're going to be transitioning the podcast. So I'm phasing out and you are phasing in as the host of the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast, which I'm super excited about because I think it's cool watching all the content that you've been creating. I know you do Ask a Property Manager still on your own Facebook channel, your different pages. And it's been cool to see you kind of get control and a good vibe for doing this content. So I'm excited to see what you do with the podcast.
Yeah, I'm super pumped too. Back in 2017, when you and I were doing the Ask a Property Manager segment originally, that was always a lot of fun with the two of us doing that. And then I kind of brought that back to life here at the beginning of 2020 on our company page. And it's been growing pretty steadily since we started doing it. We just did our 25th episode today, nice. I believe it was. So starting to get some episodes under our belt there. And, it is kind of reminiscent of what you and I had put together back in the day. And now with having the ability to do the Rent Prep podcast as well, it'll be a great way to extend our social media content.
Yeah. And I'm pretty excited about it. Just for like context for people wondering what's going on, I'm actually moving on from Rent Prep. I'm transitioning right now into my side hustle, as the kids say, into my full-time hustle. Done a lot of stuff on YouTube, creating content on YouTube and working with different marketing partners there, kind of on affiliate stuff. And going to be doing that full time going forward. So there's a lot of transitions going on right now, but I think it's all for the good. So I'm going to be excited because I'll be listening and checking in and seeing how things are going and watching the podcast change. And that's actually a good thing to talk about because not only will we hear a different voice in the podcast next week, but we're also going to be changing up the format if you want to kind of talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, we've been kind of working in the background on this for a little while now, and we've come up with a new format for the podcast. So it'll be more of a series of several segments. So, we'll still have in the news, which has always been popular with everybody who listens. And I know that that's one of the segments that you've been big on over the course of the years. We'll still have in the news. And then I know we have a couple of other segments out there as well. I'm struggling to remember the names of them off the top of my head. I don't have my notes.
Quorum. You gotta remember Forum Quorum.
Forum Quorum.
Yeah. Well, basically, Forum Quorum is like being sourced in the internet for kind of just funny or insightful forums that you see post up, whether it's in the Rent Prep for Landlords Facebook group, Bigger Pockets, Reddit threads, wherever it may be. But I'm sure you guys have come across them where there's a good heated debate on something. And then we had talked about the landlord water cooler, where I think it'll be experts coming on, and whether it be attorneys, property managers, anybody who is involved with real estate, really giving some quick expert advice. And one of the things I like too is, I know that I've had the fortune of droning on a little bit sometimes with the podcast, where it's just me. These are going to be kind of quick hitting segments. And then was it Feet on the Street, right, Andrew?
Yeah, Feet on the Street, real stories from real property managers or from industry professionals or something like that. Yep. I know the one segment is geared more towards like property management as a whole. And then one of the other segments is geared more toward real estate as an industry, so that you're getting a few different perspectives in every episode.
Yeah. And I think the cool thing is going to be is that somebody can listen to these episodes 15, 20 minutes. You can keep up on current news that affects landlords and real estate investors, but also kind of get some of these just kind of more social aspects of what's going around on the internet involved as well. And speaking of recent news, I know I just actually covered this on a previous podcast, but one of the things that's interesting too is Ithaca, New York. I covered last week talking about them going to cancel the rent. But a lot of people who are listening, even if you don't live in Ithaca, we had talked about how these things start like a precedent, and it may be something that affects you in the future. So that's why it's always good, I think, to just keep up on the recent news and events, because you kind of get an idea what might be coming down the pipe in your area.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and with everything that's going on in the world right now, things are changing at such a rapid pace. I know that, obviously things were a little bit slow in our office during the quarantine and everything. And we were, every single day, it seemed like there was a new piece of legislation that was being considered or voted on that would have substantial impact on property owners and landlords nationwide. And it was one of those situations where even like me as an industry professional trying to stay on top of it, it became overwhelming. So for someone that maybe only has one duplex property or something like that, it's almost impossible to stay on top of. Mm-hmm. So it's good to have a resource that you can tie into and say, okay, well, at least if I listen to this, 20-minute podcast, maybe I'll hear about what's going on in the world, what's changing in legislation and things like that on a national level. Or like you said, even with Ithaca, once something happens, New York, Washington, California seem to be one of the first three. Once it happens there, it'll happen everywhere. Mm-hmm. So it's good to kind of keep track of what's happening in other states, even though it might not have a direct impact on your day-to-day operation. It might very well have an impact before you know it, because of the way that these things tend to snowball.
And speaking of things changing in that, we did get a email from somebody who was listening to the podcast. His name was Ken, and I told him I would ask you this because I thought you'd be a good guest for this. But he was just asking about, with all the recent events, like if it has changed the way that you, or has it affected your tenant screening process or the ways that you're doing tenant screening or getting a new tenant into a property?
So I would say it hasn't really changed our screening criteria at all. We have a really good set of written screening criteria that we operate from every single time that we screen a tenant. And that criteria hasn't changed as a result of this. We're still looking for those same criteria. We're still looking for the same income. We're still looking for a good landlord reference. We're still looking for, the criminal background check to come back, things like that. Our criteria really haven't changed. Has the situation changed for a lot of people? Yes, but that's something that you're going to pull out, as you're doing your screening. You're going to kind of decipher, okay, this person is deeply impacted by what's going on. Maybe they're unemployed and only have unemployment coming in. How does that impact their income qualification? Things like that. It's definitely a very dynamic situation from that regard.
Yeah.
But having that set of written criteria that you go back to every single time, and making sure that criteria is fair housing compliant goes a long way in protecting you and your asset.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I think that's interesting too about what's going on right now is it's one of those few times that you can actually see the oncoming issues, and you actually know the date, right? Because you're like, well, This is when most people went on unemployment. This is how long the government funding portion of it's going to last.
Right.
Where you might be expecting where rents are going to stop getting paid,
Right. Yeah.
It's just interesting to be able to see that kind of already before it happens and know that realistically it's going to happen for a lot of people.
No, absolutely. And it's a situation where, we monitor our delinquency percentages on a monthly basis, and we have a pretty decent target that we usually stick within on a monthly basis as far as what we're collected and,
Do you mind
and what is
sharing
delinquent. You know what? I would, but I don't have the data in front of me.
Right.
I can give you some round numbers. I can tell you that typically by the 10th of the month or thereabouts, which is when we do our end of month accounting for our property owners, we're typically in the 87 to 90% collected range, which is pretty good. And speaking in the Buffalo market, keep in mind that I'm not running just a Class A portfolio. Most of the properties that we manage are B and C level properties. So to be at a 90-ish% collection rate in that portfolio type is pretty good.
Yeah.
I can tell you we've been about 5% under pace for the last few months, basically since everything started and kicked off here. We've been running about 5% under pace. We've been running in the low to mid 80 range when it comes to rents collected by that 10th of the month. And the problem we're seeing now is the tenants that didn't pay in April and didn't pay in May, didn't pay in June. So now we're starting to see that
Kind of
delinquent
snowball
amount
effect,
growing.
yeah.
It's starting to snowball, exactly.
Mhm.
So that is causing our percentages to look worse than they actually are, because it's the same tenants that are non-paying, but the balances are getting bigger. And when you factor that over the course of what our total monthly rent roll is, which is how we figure that percentage out, that's where we're running into the headaches there. So
Okay.
our percentages are starting to show that downward trend, and I think that that's going to continue once we get to the end of July and the pandemic unemployment assistance ends, that extra $600 a week,
Yeah.
unless there's some kind of an extension thereof or what have you.
Yeah, and who knows? There might be. Yeah,
Right,
Probably,
exactly. We
probably
just
by the
don't know.
time somebody listens to this, like, oh, that's not even a thing anymore.
Well, yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's the funny part about doing social media stuff right now is,
Yeah.
I published videos in March and April, end of March, beginning of April, that if somebody went back and watched them now, they'd be like, you're completely wrong, blah, blah,
Mhm.
blah. So it's not just understanding what you're learning. It's also understanding it in the context of how old is this information and is it
Yeah.
still valid?
Yeah.
And that's, even things with regards to, like evictions and stuff like that. Like,
Or
the-
economy.
yeah, everything keeps moving. Like all
Yeah.
of the goalposts keep moving. We
Mhm.
just re-entered. We're in phase 3 in Western New York now, finally.
Mhm.
But like downstate New York City, are they in phase 1 yet? I
don't
think
know.
they're in phase 1 now.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
Yeah.
It's definitely an interesting time to be in real estate.
Yeah. So, we're probably getting close to the end of the episode here. Do you have any kind of insights for people as far as, well, I probably should have done a better intro just for the people who aren't familiar with you. Property manager, they're like, thanks for this at the end of the episode, Eric. This is why I'm leaving, I can't do this stuff.
That's
But
fine.
your property manager, which is probably not the technical term you go by, right?
So
I always
I'll
forget
jump
you're
in.
associate broker, right?
No, not anymore. I'm a big
Okay.
boy now.
All right.
No, when we moved over to when we were doing the Ask a Property Management segment back before, I was an associate broker with Realty Edge, and then as of December 2019, I opened my own company under the name Own Buffalo Incorporated, and I'm a fully licensed real estate broker here in New York State. And property management is the main focus of our business, but we also do a lot of like foreclosure listings and sales. REO is what they tend to call it. So we do a lot of REO listings and sales. And we do, investment property listings and sales. I'm not super interested in the single family, unless it's friends and family or something like that. But yeah, investment property is kind of the niche that we operate inside of our company with, I'm sorry, did I say investment property or property management? Investment,
Well, you said property manager is the main
investment
niche,
property is kind of our niche, and then property management is more or less our main source of
And
revenue.
How many units are you managing still?
About 120-ish units. We've got some stuff in the pipeline that might grow that a little bit. We're pretty excited about those opportunities, but yeah, we're right in that kind of time frame there.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's going to be awesome for the listeners because you'll have so many more insights from managing that many rentals. Hopefully, most of them good insights, but I'm sure funny stuff will pop up too that you can share.
Yeah, it always does.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where you
numbers game,
you learn by fire, man. And we've made just about every mistake there is to make out there. So if somebody can learn from our mistakes and not make the same ones themselves, they're probably going to save themselves a whole lot of headache, and they're definitely going to save themselves a whole lot of money.
Mhm.
So learn from my mistakes. Don't make the same ones, and you'll be on the right path for sure.
Very cool. I love it. Well, looking forward to tuning in and keeping up on what's going on, and I'll definitely be excited. People should be excited for the next episode. I think it's going to be pretty cool with the new segments. So I'm sure there'll be some growing pains as we figure it out, but I think it's going to be awesome. And you're going to do great with it.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. We're super pumped to be working with everybody at Rent Prep again. It's a very natural thing for us to do because we've worked with you guys in the past. And I think that this is a really great opportunity for both for Own Buffalo and for Rent Prep to have basically an industry pro at their disposal at any time. So it's a good way to be.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And I was just looking up here. I jumped on the podcast at episode number 136 back in January of 2017. So coming up just 3.5 years about doing the podcast. So it's been a good run. I appreciate everybody who's listened. I know some of you guys reach out, some of you don't, but it doesn't mean you're not listening every week. It's kind of weird doing a goodbye because it's like I haven't met a lot of you people. I don't know who you are, but you say nice things most of the time when you do reach out via email and other channels. So
yeah, I mean, and there's definitely a huge community when it comes to the Rent Prep group as well.
Mhm.
Like the Facebook group, the Rent Prep for Landlords Facebook group. Last time I looked, there's like 12,000 members on that
Yeah.
group.
Yeah.
It's huge. I mean,
Mhm.
it's grown by leaps and bounds since even I came on board and was working with you guys back during the early Ask a Property Manager days. It's just the amount of members has grown drastically, and it's become its own little community in and of itself. Like there are people that I recognize their names every time I go in there. So
Yep.
it'll be great to be able to connect with everybody on another level as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wish you nothing but the best on it, Andrew. I'm excited to tune in and see how it goes. And I'm sure I'll be dropping you a line here or there. So
Well, nothing to the best for you as well, Eric. I mean, it's pretty exciting to be able to walk away from what you've done here at Rent Prep and be able to focus on your YouTube channel and continue to grow, other things that I know that you've got going on that are more or less, behind closed doors at the moment. But it's super exciting to see that you've been able to grow a YouTube channel to the stage where it can actually support you and the family and everything else. That's incredible. It's amazing. Yeah. It's super awesome.
Yeah, it's weird. Like it's one of those things where like I'm almost like ashamed to tell somebody about it because you're like, oh, cool, you're on YouTube.
Oh, I'm a YouTuber.
Yeah,
getting that YouTube cheddar, man.
you eating like cupcakes while you're Instagramming yourself, kind of thing. It's like no, I don't do that. But but yeah, I appreciate that, and we're excited, a little scared, nervous, but at the same time, just more so excited about where I'm going to take that and be able to grow that with my full-time focus. So
for sure.
All right, cool. Well, to you, good luck. To Luca, my editor forever. I appreciate all the work that you've put in on the podcast for me as well. Please leave this compliment in the episode. Nice little send off. And I wish you guys nothing but the best.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eric.
All right, guys. One last time. Until next week. Take care.